sky's not blue.
Welcome back to the Cult House Podcast. I am your host, the Scholar of Spite and the Saturday Night Delight, Roger Riddell. Joining me today, he's the vocalist for Shadows Fall, Brian Fair. How are you doing today, Brian?
Doing good, man. I wish I had some snazzy nicknames to join you with there as well, so yeah.
I was trying to figure out a way to introduce you as like a member of the big four of the new wave of American heavy metal that still flowed well. But new wave of American heavy metal is just like so long and complicated.
Totally. And the abbreviation's even worse. That doesn't roll off the tongue at all, So what has always cracked up the bands that are part of that, and I get it was easy, like you had the new wave of British heavy metal, and we were kind of, the first US bands with guitar solos and stuff going on again. But all the bands had been around for like 6+ years at that point too. So we're like, we feel old already, man, So yeah. Being called new was always funny. So, but we were happy to be a part of that wave, man. That was a crazy time.
Yeah, like I have the same challenge with coming up with like a big four for that wave that I do with just like the whole concept of the big four of thrash. Because with thrash, it's like, well, what about Exodus and Testament?
So, dude, Testament it's funny because, I get why they base it pretty much off a record sale. So I get why it's tiered the way it is. But yeah, first of all, Exodus laid a lot of the blueprint. Their record just happened to come out after Kill 'Em All. But like they were already ripping those riffs, early on. And then Testament is just one of the greatest bands of all time. So to not have them in that is, it's tough. But hey, even like, well, with Shadows Fall, we always like, there's the bands that, Lamb of God and Killswitch have had gold and platinum records and stuff. We never quite got to that level, but we're happy to be like in that like next tier where we can at least, have our logo on the festival flyer, even if it's not the top, at least it's a logo. We're still not in the tiny print. So
yeah. Cause I think like the fourth band in that would probably be Mastodon.
As far as I would say so, just because of, even though sonically they were doing something that was light years ahead of what anyone was doing, and and veered off a little more off the traditional metal path. At the time, those were shows like we were playing with Mastodon right out of the gates. So you would have, Mastodon, Killswitch, Lamb of God, Shadows Fall shows or festivals or all that. We were all friends. So to me, that was a big part of it. And then in that Testament Exodus world, you've got your God Forbids and your Unearthed and, all that. So, and, Darkest Hour and all that. So it comes down to personal preference after that. There's always that one band you discovered at that time that's always going to be, your go-to, but, so it's all subjective.
Yeah. I mean, I can remember as a teenager, like when that whole like wave of music broke too, like you could see the change at the time in the second stage lineups of the Ozzfest. Cause I remember like 2004, that started to take over. And by 2005, it was like you guys, Mastodon, and so on.
It was 2003 was the real changing the guard though. And it's funny you said that's the litmus test of where the, heavy underground scene is at. Cause if you look at 2001 and 2, you had Hatebreed was on 2002. But besides that second stage was new metal, third tier, what we called like tax write-off bands. They would get signed to major labels and either get zero promotion or literally get shelved, and that was the second stage, main stage still had some traditional metal, like some OG stuff, but it was pretty new metal dominated as well, or at least radio metal dominated. 2003, the second stage was half and half. It was about a 50% split. It was us, Killswitch, Chimera, Sworn Enemy, and then a lot of like weird new metal bands like Grade 8 and Unloco and Memento and what was that band? Oh, Twisted Method. And they were all like, on major labels. All the rest of us were on indie labels. Half of us had never heard the word tour support or anything like that, And So these bands would come out and they'd be like, "Oh man, our record just came out. We can't get posters from the label, and like they're gonna cut our tour support." And we're like, "Ah, yeah, man, that's you're getting tax written off." And but even the crowd we were seeing, we would go on, and like our style and just energy was so different. And I'm on the barricade, people are singing along. The hardcore kids who came out are like knocking dudes down, and like it's chaos. And then the new metal would come out, and they just kind of like sort of it was like a downshift in energy, and you could see the change in the guards. By 2004, the entire second stage was all that, at least that style, but mostly independent metal label bands too, like Metal Blade, Century Media, Roadrunner, and then by 2005, bands like Us and In Flames were on the main stage. So
Yeah.
it was a total shift from that. So, and it was that 2003, like Ozzfest second stage was chaos because we rolled in like a gang basically. Because us, Sworn Enemy, these bands have been Kill Switch. We've been touring together already, so we just took over. Like, and all these other bands were like, what is fucking going on? So it was the best, man. It was the best.
Yeah, I mean, one thing that just really made that whole like changing of the guard stand out to me even more at the time was that like just the whole vibe of the bands was different. I think maybe this is partly because of the hardcore influence in the scene, but it felt like the lyrics in a lot of cases leaned a little bit more into like PMA, you know? Like there was
Oh,
more of a
100%.
this is a problem for me now, but I can overcome this.
Yeah, we a lot of those bands, even if sonically we weren't playing what traditional hardcore would be considered, all came out of that scene or at least played shows in that scene. I mean, I grew up fully 90s hardcore kid as, choker chains and baggy pants and, total youth crew into the 90s, like kind of melodic hardcore stuff. That was my real roots. And so lyrically, I'm drawn from a well that's more Youth of Today and Bad Brains and even Integrity, which was more evil, but I still had a like coming from the heart, coming from the streets kind of approach to the lyrics, as opposed to Dungeons and Dragons and shit of old metal. But then also totally opposite of like the goofiness of some of the new metal, where it's like we're not singing about like just nookie and shit, like there was a little something to it. And I do think that was shaped by, a lot of us coming out of the hardcore scene. Killswitch was the same way. Jesse was a young hardcore kid, and so was Howard. So even when they switched singers, the lyrics still stayed from that vein. Uh, and Randy from Lamb of God comes from more of a punk rock and hardcore background than metal or death metal. So as much as I love death metal and especially the melodic death metal, lyrically didn't connect to me as much. Some band like At the Gates was different. That dude wrote some super just introspective kind of like lyrics, but a lot of it, and it was just kind of gore metal or that stuff never really just hit me the same way that you know the lyrics from like 90s hardcore did. So yeah, that was definitely part of it for sure. But also, I even think coming from those shows, your connection with an audience is different. Even death metal bands were still used to playing behind barricades and like more like traditional clubs. I was used to playing like soup kitchens and the basement of coffee shops and shit, without stages and all that. So once we even got to the bigger arena kind of level, I would try and shrink that immediately and make it a hardcore show. So, which probably surprised some new metal kids in the front when all of a sudden I'm literally just back, like front flipping onto their head, and they're like, "What the fuck is happening?" So, but that was how I came up and wanted to always bring that energy to Shadows Fall as well. So.
Yeah. Did that make it difficult in like 2005 when you had to transition to the main stage of the Ozfest?
100%. The rest of the band probably not as much because they just they're headbanging, hair down, trying to sweet pick and shit. I'm looking out at like the first 200 rows or seats, and it is Ozfest probably at 5:30, 6 o'clock in the day, so still pretty early. So you've got a lot of people who are rolling in, waiting to see Ozzy, who sat down with their nachos and their like little tray of beers, and they're like, "Yeah, man, I'm not getting up." And I get it. I was like, you got those nachos look delicious. Like, I wish I could come and sit down and have a snack. And all of our fans who are, were younger and probably more broke are in the lawn, so you'd see the circle pits and all that stuff on the lawn. I regret to this day on that set I never use a wireless mic. because I like to spin the cord. I need to feel it like in my hands. But I wish I would have one because I would definitely would have gone like out to the lawn and
Yeah.
like started to bring the ruckus. But it was still awesome. It changed. It made me a better frontman because I couldn't rely on the cheap pop of like just standing on the barricade or crowd surfing or stage diving. You had to bring attention to the music and what you're doing and make it I always it's kind of like being a wrestler. You the guys in the back row have to see your expression the same way the people in the front row do, so it improved me as a performer. But if it's up to me, I'd much rather be able to like have the madness in front of you. And that shit happens at big festivals too. Sometimes those VIP sections will be in the front, and it's people who paid $1,000 like to sit there, and like they're not trying to see us, like they don't give a shit, and all the actions behind them. So, but you get used to it. And if anything, my goal is to get those people either to put down the nachos or like at least remember who we are because I pissed them off, one or the other. So,
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, it's something that I've thought about a lot over the years, just from like the number of times that I've seen Lamb of God, for instance. Like, I've just kind of seen how Randy's approach to the crowd has evolved to where, the last several times that I saw them, I was also photographing them and like seeing it that close. It's just like, oh, okay. Like I see how much he moves around stage now, and he's got like, I think it's like trampolines or something now that he kind of like jumps off of sometimes.
well, they at least got some support to it. Our old knees need a little, need a little help. So, yeah. But yeah, the stair setup that he has too, it gives you just something to do. Otherwise, you're gonna walk around in a circle like not knowing. So yeah, they've been arena rockers for a while, so they've got the game down. And I
Yeah.
will tell you though, once you get to that level, a little fire doesn't hurt. A little Hollywood action. And also, just people are looking at a huge stage, and if it's just five dudes kind of moping, it's not as exciting. So yeah, you got to bring a little of the theatrics, and those dudes got it down.
Yeah.
They're a straight arena. We just did an arena with them and Hatebreed in Massachusetts that was amazing. But yeah, it was a full arena rock show, and we were like, man, when we started doing shows together, like, yeah, dude, it was 150 cap clubs and like where the only special effects were the sweat from the ceiling literally dripping like onto the you know. Oh,
Yeah, no, like it's just so wild, like thinking back to just the difference in vibes between some of the shows that I saw as a teen and like the VFW halls and stuff in Kentucky. I had some friends who would book hardcore shows in my hometown in Elizabethtown, which is near Louisville. And I remember like they got in trouble like one time because someone like punched out the like ceiling tiles in one of these halls, and you have stuff like that, or like someone would punch a hole in a wall somewhere, and then you have to settle up with whoever owns the building or whatever.
totally,
But
man. That
yeah,
more venues were ruined by the band's friends than anything else in the world, half the time.
yeah,
So, but speaking of ceiling tile shows, we played a show in where was it? I think it was in Maine with Terror and Cephalic Carnage, and it was like a pool hall that was split in half. So it was like a shotgun room, and then pool tables on the other side that we weren't supposed to be messed with. The drop ceiling was so low that at that time my hair wasn't even as long, and it's first headbang, it hits the ceiling tiles. So the kids are trying to crowd surf and immediately start punching through the ceiling tiles, exposed wires everywhere, chaos. Then at that point, it's like, all right, well, this venue's done. So fuck it. Just everyone's like, all right, just go for it. By the end, the entire ceiling's down. There's photos up it on this guy from Return to the Pit was there, and he puts them up every year on the anniversary because it looks so insane. Like there's literally just dangling wires, like a weird metal barricade, a wooden barricade they built. The kids are diving off of, feet going through the rafters, like absolute chaos. It could have been more fun. The best part is all the bands are all just smiling the entire time, just like pointing and like, yeah. So, yeah, good times. But that definitely ends. That was a one and done for sure.
yeah, yeah. No, I love a good like weird venue too. Like I can remember in 2008, I saw Guar on a tour that they did with Kingdom of Sorrow and Toxic Holocaust, and they were booked in this club in Louisville called Club Oasis. There was like a tiki bar. And I don't think that they were really set up for Guar, but
Guar at a
the
tiki bar is as good as it gets, though, man. Like that's pretty much the perfect setting to see
yeah.
Guar, because like you're like that's as ridiculous as it should be, you know. Although I do feel bad for whoever had to mop up off all the fake palm trees and shit, like and
Yeah.
bamboo. So Guar's, we got to tour with them one full tour, but played a bunch of shows with them through the years. Man, it was always a mess, and just watching the venue try and figure out like how this is gonna work was always great. But yeah, the random venues are the best, man. Like I said, we literally played a soup kitchen in Keene, New Hampshire, with I think it was with All That Remains and Brand New Sin, and we had to wait till they served, like all the people food before we could even load in. Then we load in. The stage is, like 6 inches high, and there's a mural painted by kids of rainbows and shit behind it. And we're like, dude, this just rules. So we've and I think if you don't come, like even going back to the thing we were talking about before on the Ozzfest, if you don't come up from that and haven't survived some of the weirdness that is like being a metalcore, hardcore band touring in the late '90s, early 2000s, you're not ready for when things go wrong. Like, so those bands on Ozzfest, when things did go wrong, didn't know how to handle it. We're like, dude, this is the easiest tour we've ever done. Like, are you kidding me? Like, this is so professionally run and all that. And like, it didn't matter. We've seen it all. I've played squats in Germany. I've played, just a flatbed truck in the woods. I've done it all. So it's like, this shit's easy.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I've got like friends in bands like the Atlas Moth here in Chicago where like they've told me before, like early on when they were still just like going around in vans and shit, like you've got to just like as far as food or whatever, you've got to go for like the cold cans of SpaghettiOs at night from the gas station a lot of the time.
Dude, the overcast tours, like our early days, I would make tomato soup for free by getting hot water for tea that was almost always free, two ketchup packets, and the salt and pepper that was on the side, and just like whip it up and be like, whatever, man, that's lunch. And and then you graduated to where everyone got to get two things off the dollar menu at like Wendy's or something or Taco Bell. And I was vegetarian back then, so which was a lot harder in the early '90s, mid '90s. So like, yeah, just living off of like four French fries and like or like the baked potato from Wendy's. Like, so when we get to you get something to where there's catering, we're like, dude, this is as good as it gets. You're crazy. Although
Yeah.
now we're probably spoiled. I don't think I could at age 50. I don't think I could live through the overcast van days again. But I'm glad I did. But it is a young man's game. But you can tell who did and didn't come up in a van. 1,000% on the touring world. Who came up in a van and they're ready for anything.
Yeah, dude, you mentioned Taco Bell, and like one thing that I heard recently was that like Taco Bell has like a whole program now where like touring artists can get like some kind of sponsorship from them where they get gift cards while they're on tour.
Yeah, that's definitely a thing. We at one point I know we got like weird, like almost like gold tokens from them at some point, but they definitely have always tried to dip into the band world. We never got enough of it, though. I'll tell you that. Like whatever crazy corporate sponsors are happening now, like if we're on the road, we're down. Taco Bell, send us some shit.
Yeah, no, I guess this year marks the 20th anniversary of Threads of Life, which was your all's major label debut, which kind of ties together pretty well with what we're talking about with when you transitioned up to the main stage of Ozzfest in '05 as well. What are like some of the memories that, stick out to you from that period?
Yeah, it was a crazy time because the War Within did really really well, especially for being on Century Media. And there was that whole feeding frenzy of labels sniffing around, and we were a little wary of all that. Just kind of coming up from where we did everything ourselves, and then graduated to like smaller labels and all that. So luckily, we'd learned a lot as well. So when we were talking to labels, we knew exactly what we wanted, like deal wise. Um, so we signed a super band friendly contract with Atlantic. It was insane. And so a lot of people were like, "Oh, why didn't you stay with something like Century Media?" We're like, actually, they offered probably more cash, but we had a better deal with Atlantic that seemed like we had a lot of control. Unfortunately, the classic Shadows Fall move of signing to a label and then whoever signed you to said label is immediately not there by the time the record comes out, followed suit again. It happened at Century Media, then it happened at Atlantic, and then it happened like another time down the road. So unfortunately, once we got there, our kind of support system was gone by the time the record came out. Um, but the recording of it was amazing. We did it at Studio 606, which is Dave Grohl's studio out in LA. We'd never recorded in kind of that environment. We'd always done everything with Zeus at Planet Z, which was a very, kind of home style studio. So getting to record in a place where literally in the back room where the equipment is like Kurt Cobain's Roland 120 JC amp that he recorded all the clean guitars for Nevermind is just sitting there, like insane. And all these like platinum records between Foo Fighters and Nirvana everywhere. So we're like, whoa, this is a different level. Like, holy shit. And we first went there, we walk in and we're meeting with Nick Raskulinecz, the producer, and Dave Grohl just pops his head in like, y'all should make a metal record here. Just closes the door and we're like, yeah, that's pretty much happening. Like, yeah, we're already sold. So that was wild. And we lived in LA for a couple months in like, kind of condo style, like near the studio, which was awesome, but very not as rock and roll as like probably the like the old days, but like for us, like a whole level of like LA rock and roll. Um, and I'm very proud of the songs on that record, but I do think production wise, we maybe lost a little grit and teeth to it. I wish we would have kind of kept our like we might have listened sometimes too much to like what we think we should do as opposed to doing what we wanted to do at first. Not even songwriting wise, the songs are pretty aggressive and like metal, but I think just sonically we might have kind of lost the vision for on a few things. But it's crazy to me that that's 20 years now because I still think of that as like a later day record, and we're like, yeah, they're all later day now. We're just old. So,
Yeah.
but it's crazy. It's been 20 years. But yeah, for us, it was a crazy experience. But then by the time, like I said, everyone left the label, including the president, who literally was the president of the label, was like, oh, well, at least I'll never go anywhere, and like then is gone within a year, bought out. And so when it came time for the second record, it had sold enough to kick in all these like kind of economic clauses where they're like, all right, well now next record you got to give us this much money to make it, and we're like, or since no one here, I mean, they're the singles they were pushing at the time were like Trick Daddy and shit like that. We were just like sore thumbs on the label, and we were like, for this number we'll go away, and they paid us out. We then turned around and signed with a subsidiary of Ferret that was owned by Warner Brothers, who owns Atlantic. So they basically paid us to go away and then paid for Retribution to be made. So it worked out pretty awesome. So.
Yeah. No, I can remember like I think it was 13 or 14 years ago I read a Mastodon interview where I think Bran was saying that someone at Warner's had told them at one point that if this had been like the 90s, they would have been rich. But because of the
Oh,
way that the music industry was, like
one
everything was fucked.
thousand percent. What's crazy is we even came at the tail end where there was at least still some money. Because like when we were on Century Media selling 250,000 copies of an album that cost $15,000 to make, there's some money to be made there. Now, granted, you got to like really go after them to actually get what's deserved, and that's a whole other story. But radio play alone, you would get paid on MTV stuff. Like there was actually still publishing money out there, but it was nothing compared to what had been happening in the 80s and 90s. Whereas if you were a band of this size, you were going to guarantee to sell, not 200,000 copies, you're selling like almost close to a million. Um, but then, and we signed when we signed with Atlantic, we even got a signing bonus. And for us, it was insane. But again, nothing compared to what they were writing checks in the 90s. Now, all that shit was gone within a few years of that. I think we signed one of the last crazy Atlantic records that wasn't a pop, like legacy or pop band thing. And you saw the changing of that where, dude, the budgets they were throwing at us for like a video were madness to the point too where we're like, we could make 5 videos for that. They're like, no, it's written in the contract. You got to use it for one. So then, of course, we're also like, well, our friend will direct it. We're going to spend crazy money on dumb things like let's get a crane, like like if we have to use this money for this video, like fuck it, let's go for it. But you saw that was where you saw some of the waste too. You're like, I get why the industry is struggling. You're like, you guys are wasting money on things that are unnecessary especially for a band like us. So, but yeah, I feel it's got to be tough now for bands because all that money is gone. Where like you can still get a budget to record, but it's way more difficult to survive full time if you're not just a touring machine and a merch machine. You know, that's where you have to be now. So it's crazy.
Yeah, and I mean even all of those the new wave of American heavy metal bands, like most of them have that reputation as being touring machines during that time too. So
Oh
it's
yeah,
like y'all had that going already.
yeah. You had to be then because like that, that's how we all our bands broke by playing live.
Yeah.
And thankfully then like MTV2 doing Headbangers Ball and even Uranium on was it Fuse TV, those helped. But we wouldn't even gotten on those things had we not proven ourselves as like a touring act where like hey, you guys may be ignoring this, but like people are showing up, and then the numbers just couldn't be ignored anymore. And then when we got on, an Ozzfest or bands would jump on Warped Tour or whatever it was and just smash, and you're like, yeah, look, go to the FYE tent and see who sold more CDs this week. Like, was it the new wave of American heavy metal bands, or was it the new metal bands? So it was definitely there, but it was because of just that relentless touring. And some of those dudes haven't slowed down, man. It's crazy. They're still out there going just as hard. So,
Yeah.
although a little nice, a little plusher these days.
Yeah, and the summer following Threads of Life, you guys were on the Sounds of the Underground tour, and that, kind of brings us to something that prompted me asking you to be on the podcast because I had been talking to Andy Williams from Every Time I Die on the last episode, and we were talking about the Waverly Hills stop at the end of that tour and how insane that day was just because of not just because of the lineup, but because of all of the things that kind of fell apart as far as the logistics of that show.
Yep. Yeah, that was a madhouse, man. But it was also the coming together of two like steamrollers hitting in the middle too. It was the end of well, there was an off day for an Ozfest, but it was all like our buddies, and then the last day of Sounds. So they just shoehorned it all in together, basically in a field next to like a haunted asylum. So
Yeah.
like on paper, you're already like, this is gonna be crazy. But then you add in like shitty line, like where it took, I think it took forever for people to get in, if I remember right, where they had to like bring people over from other areas, or there was because it was definitely in a weird kind of area to get to physically. So, but yeah, that was a crazy one, man. But yeah, being on that like, underground Sound of the Underground was crazy enough to begin with on that one. It was such a wacky lineup. It was just all over the place. And we were already, I think, 6 or 7 weeks in and ending. So you're already like kind of like delirious from the road and have full space madness, at that point. Then you took all of a sudden roll in and see Behemoth and like all these other dudes who are also just on full Ozfest, summer camp of doom mode. And the party was just madness, like straight madness. I remember that day, like there was definitely like people are still feeling permanent effects of the partying that was going down that day backstage. Like there's definitely spots on liver that could be brought back to that day specifically.
Yeah. I mean, I remember the crowd getting restless because the concessions ran out and like there was no
It
water
was there like
and
no water or some shit, but the water
yeah.
supply couldn't be drank
Yeah, because
either.
they had
There
to
was
tell
like,
everyone not to do that because there was tuberculosis on the grounds because
was
it
that,
was
I was
formerly
gonna
a
say, was it
tuberculosis
malaria or
sanatorium.
some shit, or like
Yeah.
you got the Hunter virus in the fucking water system. So yeah, which is classic. Like it's funny how the infrastructure has improved a lot. I see hardcore fests now that are run better than like some professional crazy stuff. But back then, it was definitely a like, we'll figure it out as we go. And then they figure out like, oh shit, like there's way more people here than we expected. It's chaos. Like, yeah, thankfully, I don't think there was, didn't get to near riot areas, but it was definitely a tense vibe. But it was, I remember playing that day. It was a blast though, because like you can tell you're also like when you see a crowd that's kind of got a little edge to it, you're just like, all right, man, focus that like into the pit and like let's just go off. So
Yeah.
yeah, that was
I have like overall like really good memories of that show, but then like I remember there was talk at one point during the day about someone I guess maybe getting like trampled or something during the Hatebreed set, and then there was a girl that I knew in college who I didn't even know she was at the show until like a few weeks ago because she reached out to me after I had posted that video with Andy, and she was telling me that at that show uh some guy had like ripped her shirt off or whatever, and then Guar
Oh,
gave her Oreos.
well, see, people think they're just scum dogs of the universe, but look it, they're coming with a helping hand. Someone's, had a tough moment, and they got Oreos for you.
Yeah,
Like
the
so,
universe's nicest warlords.
exactly. That's that. And one thing that sucks that was also happening in that era and even before was kind of the combining of more mainstream sort of meathead metal and hardcore and new wave of heavy metal, whatever it is. All that coming together, you did have some people etiquette wise that really didn't kind of get things the same way we did, and that was unfortunate because you would see the kind of drunk dudes who are just there just to swing on people. And hate breed, honestly, even the regular hate breed pit's already going to be intense. But then you add in that kind of element that doesn't understand you're not actually supposed to like try and break someone's jaw. It adds a whole different element of kind of violence and chaos that can also then get dealt with by hardcore kids that up the ante to make it even more about what I mean,
Yeah.
like reacting to someone not knowing what to do. Then all of a sudden there's a 10-on-1 beatdown in the middle, and it's like, ah, and it's weird because I've always had a weird relationship with the violence at shows in general because I like nothing more than to see just madness out there. But I come from a place where that madness always had a sense of respect and safety to it too, where there was like at least watching out for your fellow man. But at the same time, I'm literally making mosh calls like fucking destroy this place and shit, and you're like, oops, like it's hard not to get caught up in it. So it is kind of a double-edged sword there. But we were seeing that definitely in that era at a lot of festivals. You'd see just stuff where it's like people just kind of didn't get it, or dudes who you're just like, you're not here for the message or the music or any of that stuff. You're here just to get wasted and cause some trouble, and that always would suck too. And and it should be a safe environment for everyone there. And that's always unfortunate when it isn't.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, now that you're mentioning that, like I do feel like when I noticed that kind of like changing of the guard around the early to mid 2000s, there definitely was kind of a shift in the tone of like pit etiquette and things like that because it doesn't feel like the pits were as belligerent like a few years after that as they were a few years before it. Like it feels like people looked out for each other a little bit more.
Yeah, yeah, and that it is crazy because like you do the chaos visually sometimes cannot even be when it's like as scary. What gets scarier sometimes when it's like more breaks off and there's just one or two dudes who are coming to like just hurt people, and that's when it always sucks to me. And honestly, like some of the even new approach to mosh, like the crowd killing and all that shit, that was never like scene I was like down with or part of, But like I don't know, man. I came from shows where like there were definitely riots, but half the time there were riots because of other reasons. It was usually like either cop related or because some shit got out of hand that people didn't want to. Like there was a Shelter show in Boston that was legendary. It was at a church in Cambridge, and Shelter's a Hare Krishna hardcore band, but came out of Youth of Today and all that. So and at the time it packed show, probably 1,500 kids, and it was getting rough. And there was a lot of kind of dudes who weren't there, definitely not for Krishna consciousness, and were there just like literally trying to fuck with skinny vegan like little straight edge kids, and to the point where Ray Capo's like, "Fuck this, everyone sit down." Well, he probably didn't say fuck because he's Krishna, but everyone sit down. We don't need moshing, we don't need anything. Just sit down, let's whatever. And one guy wouldn't sit down, and this guy's kind of telling him, and he swings and just knocks the dude out, and Ray just yells, "Get him!" And like all of a sudden, like 1,500 little vegan straight edge Krishna kids are trying to attack like five dudes who then all of a sudden somehow have hockey sticks and are just clearing them out like almost like that World War Z shit, like waves of Krishna beads are just flying in every direction while like just a few like kind of thugged out dudes are just cleaning house, and it was chaos, man. So like I'd seen tons of shit like that, and you used to go to New York when things would get kind of crazy at shows, but it was just a different mentality. There wasn't that like I don't know. I don't know. It was just different. I don't know. So it's always been a weird thing that way, like where you want the chaos, but I don't want to. When I see people get hurt, I get bummed. I would talk
Yeah.
about that with Randy one time. I remember like there was a show in I think we were in somewhere in Orange County. I was on the Headbangers Ball tour, and during their set, some dude's nose just got like almost just pushed back into his face. It was crazy. And Randy was so bummed because he felt like, oh man, our like riffs are making people like punch people in the face. And you're like, yeah, unfortunately, like they kind of have that effect, you know. But you don't want to see that. It's always a bum out. So it's tough. So
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, at
I mean,
the
unfortunately, Randy dealt with more than that even as time went on too. You know. So
yeah. Yeah, because I mean, he had the that whole Czech Republic thing.
yeah, that's what I mean. So it's like, and that's the thing is, I'm a dude who stage dives. I still like I see Hatebreed and they play certain songs. Next thing I know, my 50-year-old ass is in the crowd. My wife's freaking out, you know, because I love stage diving. But there is something about coming on stage that changes dynamics, and if people fall and get hurt, is where you know it's just it's tough, and the last thing you want to see is anyone at your show get injured. So it's tough, but it's always going to be part of this music. It's always going to be part of the scene. You just hope people find a way to respectfully kind of look out for each other and do the right thing.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I think the craziest thing that I can always remember as far as that kind of stuff goes that, I actually saw in person at a show was the 2005 Ozzfest in Indianapolis. During Rob Zombie's set, this dude just came wandering out of the pit and he was a bald dude and he's just like bleeding from the forehead. And he was going, he bit me. The motherfucker bit me.
Oh yeah, that's some nightmare shit, man. You're like what disease did I just pick up watching Rob Zombie? And that was Rob Zombie's stripped down set. I remember that was
Yeah.
when he was just in a t-shirt doing like Black Betty, you know, like covers and shit, you know. So you're like, man, really? Did I just get bit and catch hepatitis during Rob Zombie's set? You know, like ah. But yeah, dude, I've seen some crazy shit like that. Like, but honestly, Boston when I was young in the early '90s, and there were some violent shows, man. And you would see dudes who literally get hit with hammers in the pit and shit. Like it was fucking nuts. But I was the little kid like who was always on the side who could do flips. So like I kind of either got protected or at least had my friends. But yeah, I don't miss that shit these days. If someone hits me, man, my day is over. Like I ain't trying. I still like can get mix it up for certain bands every now and then. Like I said, still love the stage dive occasionally, but yeah, I ain't trying to get hit in the face these days.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I vaguely remember in high school, I had a friend who was like really into the hardcore scene who showed me a documentary at one point about Boston and Friends Stand United.
The Boston Beatdown video,
Yeah.
yeah, like legendary for all the wrong reason video. Yes, that was. It's funny because I was around during that time, obviously, but those were dudes who got into the scene kind of after me, and those roots were laid by the crazy dudes that I went to shows with, you know. So, but then it became like honestly like more of an identity than like a reason. A lot of the dudes who were kind of starting that, especially whether it was the New York hardcore scene or the early Boston scene, they were either kind of street kids or dudes who were just kind of like grew up tough, you know. And then it became a more of a like, watch this, like thing. And it's like it changes, you know. But yeah, what are you gonna do? And it's funny because you say you grew up in Louisville, right? Like
Yeah.
that area. I was a huge fan of a lot of like Louisville bands like Endpoint and Split Lip and all that stuff. And that couldn't have been more opposite vibe of like that kind of thing. You know, it was way more like like almost proto emo, but like in the real way, like and it's funny, yeah, because some of those bands that would come to Boston and be like, "What is happening? Like, what? Why is
Yeah.
everyone spin kicking their friends?" You're like, don't worry about
Okay,
it.
so you mentioned the Louisville scene, and like back in 2009, for Louisville Magazine, I put together an oral history of Louisville's punk and hardcore scene. I'll send you an email with that article
Oh yeah,
later
that'd be rad.
because I've got both like the article that ran, but then I've got like a longer like uncut version that I'll send you too.
Cool. Yeah, man. Some of those bands, especially in the early '90s, just pushed hardcore in a ton of different directions that really inspired a lot of people. And to me, I still listen to a lot of that. I still listen to Split Lip and Endpoint all the time, and it's crazy. Like Duncan, the guitar player of Endpoint, became an author. Love all his books too. It's crazy how the hardcore scene and it kind of has so many tendrils these days that you see like they've gone into so many other industries and different art forms. It's just such a cool thing to see.
Yeah, yeah. I can remember this one band from Louisville called King Horse. Like they were eventually
Yep.
signed by Caroline and Danzig produced their first album. And I remember them telling me stories about that and like Danzig basically didn't really do much during that process, according to them, other than like having tickle fights with the girl from the She Rides video on the couch in the studio.
I mean, that if that doesn't inspire you to make a great record, though, I mean, that's producing as far as I'm concerned. I always love when you see the produced by, and it was like a dude from a band who had never turned a knob in a studio in their life, and it's like you're more like vibe coach, like
Yeah.
some dude like now there's some guys in bands who literally produce like Adam Deep from Killswitch is an incredible producer, but he's making records. He's like turning knobs and setting up mics and all that. Some dudes are like, sounds good, doesn't sound good. I'm gonna tickle the girl from She Rides. There we go, and we're done. That I wish my band had a story like that. That's incredible, man.
Yeah, like it was a combo of that and like Danzig just getting pissed anytime that someone took a photo of him and he was smiling.
That's great.
Yeah. So while I was prepping for this interview, one of the other things that I saw was that you have a YouTube channel for heavy metal hippie workouts. Can you tell me
Yeah,
about that?
yeah, yeah. I've been it's been on not a I guess a hiatus sort of more because just I wish I was better at content creation. I got all the ideas. I just don't have the time and the ambition. But what basically how it started during COVID, I had realized that I would no longer my metabolism no longer kept me in the frontman shape that I used to be at all times. I was one of those people who didn't matter what I did, and I played enough shows and got that cardio that way all the time that I had stayed the same weight basically my entire life, and could eat whatever I wanted, didn't matter. And then that hit a wall. And I remember kind of pre-COVID, I was saying, man, I was like, if I had time, I would get into sick shape, and I almost had a plan of how I'd do it. But my excuse was like, well, no, I don't have time. Then COVID hit and I was furloughed from my job and all that. And I was like, all right, I'm going in. So I started kind of studying more, where I was kind of studying through this program called ACE. It's like, the American Center for, exercise, for their personal training stuff, just more to learn stuff. And started doing workouts that were a lot of body weight focused, not a lot of weight. I wanted to more like get like, kind of that like skinny shredded like kind of thing back. And a lot of high interval training stuff, and that led to I was doing a lot now, and some of my friends were kind of asking for tips and all that. So I started just kind of being like, you know what, I've been doing these workouts, and I was getting ready for some tour. Shadows Fall was actually planning on doing our first reunion show in a while, so I wanted to be back in like stage shape. So I kind of just figured I'd share those, with people, and then I kind of expanded it to doing some dumbbell stuff and some other stuff. But it's been probably unfortunately life had a bunch of stuff that threw some wrenches in my time and availability. But I am trying to I've actually have a whole plan for a bunch of different videos to come out soon. I think I'm gonna do some more like short focus stuff because I know people don't have a ton of time. Where like a lot of morning work. I've been learning now these days. I've shifted a little bit from before. If I wasn't sweating and almost dying, I didn't think I was doing anything. And I'm starting to realize as sometimes that isn't necessary. I've been getting into more kind of ancient Chinese movements of like, these wake up exercise routines that really are more like getting your whole system awake and limber and alive, and how you see the results from that almost more sometimes than going so hard. Now, I still have a competitive side, so I still want to do those workouts to prove to myself I can do shit that I did when I was 20 at 50. But I'm also realizing I need to balance it with more of this flexibility and kind of overall almost secondary joints and muscle workouts as well. So hopefully I'll get back on the horse and get some more videos up. But I think there's about a decent amount of between some core and ab workouts, some cardio stuff, as well as some dumbbells. There's definitely some stuff where I base it around the time of festival set lists too, where if I have a 45-minute set list, I would literally sing the whole set in my car on the way to work, come home, exercise this routine while singing with like noise canceling headphones. So people walking by my house would just hear me screaming, also doing burpees, so probably slamming into the floor, but no music. So they're probably just like, what the fuck is happening in that basement, man? This dude's insane. But that's how I would get ready for shows because I couldn't simulate jumping off the riser and running around and the adrenaline rush. So I would do these high intensity interval trainings while singing. And so I want to get some of those more out there too. So hopefully, so the channel's still up and the videos are still up. So hopefully I'll update it soon.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, the thing that I noticed when I watched a few of the videos was that a lot of it also seemed like really practical stuff that you could just like work into the day while you're on tour too, like before a set, you know?
100%. That's where a lot of my workouts started. Either dressing rooms are very small in some venues, so you got about yoga mat with kind of workout area, and also sometimes on the bus. I wanted actually, if we would have had time, I was going to film stuff where it's literally in the hallway of bunk alley. Because on a tour bus you got the hallway that's just bunks on each side. So some of these workouts you could do in that area. So like hotel room, backstage, back lounge of the bus, hallway of the bus, no excuses, that you can work it out anywhere. Also, most of them were between 15 and 30 minutes tops, the 30, but like, so that's all you need. And you can really, not only burn a ton of calories, but especially if you do body weight and low weight dumbbell stuff, you're just balancing everything. You're not, because I'm not trying to bodybuild. I want to be able to like chase my kids down as I get older. I want to be able to still like get up on stage and perform. I want to skateboard on the weekend still, even at 50 years old. And these are the type of workouts that can help you do that stuff. So
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, you gotta stay in shape so you can jump on stage and not blow out a knee, you know?
yeah, well, and it's funny because there are a lot of bands. Pretty much every band does a reunion these days, and I don't want to go up there as a this is the version of them now like mindset. I'm like, no, I'll go watch Hellfest 2002 video and be like, I want to still be that guy. Like, the hair's just longer. I got to try not to trip on it. But besides that, I want to be able to like still jump as high. I want to still be flipping in the crowd. I don't want to run out of breath while singing. I want to be able to bring it. And obviously, it's delusional to think I'll be where I was when I was 25, but I want to at least be the facsimile of what I can do at this age and bring it all. So and it's inspiring. Honestly, we toured with Iron Maiden, I think in 2005, and they were playing, an hour and 40 minutes, and Bruce is running nonstop, hitting every note. And I was like, man, I was before our set, I was like, oh man, I'm kind of tired today. I got to do 40 minutes, man. I got nothing, like I was like, there's no excuse. That dude is 20 years older than me, running around like an absolute maniac and hitting notes I've never come close to. So
Yeah.
that inspired me as well. You see these guys who can still crush it. So,
Yeah, I mean that and like I think it's like Yannick plays his solos without missing a note behind his head while fighting Eddie on
dude,
stage.
dude, he literally can somehow sweep pick by using his guitar cable against the strings, and it'll be like, and you're like, it's funny, man. I will say, like, just off subject, when we did that tour with Iron Maiden, obviously, Iron Maiden's in my Mount Rushmore of all time bands, and you don't know how it's going to be like backstage with these like legends. And right away, Nico McBrain was the coolest motherfucker on the face of the earth. Where we'd come into our dressing room and he's already in there drinking our beers and like eating off of our like catering stuff, and he's just like, I felt like I'd have yours today, and like we're just like, dude, love this guy. And you'd be playing and look out, and they're on the side of the stage watching, like they're just totally hanging out. And I used to kind of clown on Yannick for the moves and being like, we need a third guy, really. And of course, who turns out to be the nicest and coolest of all the dudes? Of course, it's Yannick. Like this dude rules. So it's just funny, man. But they were super inspiring because not only are you treating all these bands this well at a level of just superstardom, you're crushing every night in front of a young. That the only reason they did that Ozzfest, they didn't have to like draw wise. They could have done those venues on their own. They wanted to get in front of some younger kids and be like, Iron Maiden kicks fucking ass, man.
Yeah.
You better recognize, and it was that lesson of like, man, no matter how big you are, no matter what you think you are, like being cool is easy. And that's a lesson that I hope most bands like kind of remember. It's like, and everyone says you see the same people on the way down as you see on the way up or whatever, but it's not even that. It's just about human kindness and being like, there's no reason to big time dudes, like the biggest of the big don't do it. Like, so get over yourself.
Yeah.
Now, I shouldn't, not all of the biggest of the big don't do that, but the good ones do.
Yeah, I mean that whole sentiment just also kind of reminds me of the Henry Rollins story about when he opened for Ozzy on a tour once, and like every night Ozzy was just kind of worried that people
Oh
weren't going to
shit, I
show
wasn't
up
there.
for him.
Oh, I think people will be here tonight. It's like you're fucking Ozzy. Yeah, dude, it's sold out. Like we're gonna be fine. You know.
Yeah.
Hey, Ozzy was cool, man. I, we saw him, a decent amount on Ozzfest, but he's kind of in a separate sort of universe there. But he would also kind of work out in the hallway, and you'd see him jumping rope before like catering, and you're like, that's so cool. But then I did a commercial for Affliction Clothing, and Ozzy, the only two people on the shoot the day I was there was me and Ozzy. And I was like, it's crazy. Like, it's Ozzy's here. And this is height of Osborne TV show, like all that. And, where he's supposedly the doddering, like, kind of goofy guy. That dude was blocking his own shots, asking for different filters, like completely in control of the whole situation. That, like, so, is he playing a character? Yeah, definitely a little bit because that dude, he had his shit together. Like he knows how this works. He's a pro in every way and could have been cooler. Like yeah, we've done some Ozzfest, but it's not like he's going to remember, like, oh, yeah, you're the dude from Shadows Fall. But he walks over, he grabs a piece of my hair and he's like, oh, my drummer, which was Mike Borden at the time. That's dressed like yours. He's like, how you think we would get if we smoked that? And I'm like, Ozzy, I will pack a bowl of this shit right now if you'll light it up. Like 100%. I haven't cut my hair in, 30 years. I will cut a piece off right now if you're gonna smoke it. Unfortunately, did not smoke it, but could have been cooler. And again, it was the total classic. Like, man, that dude doesn't need to, he could have been in his own little world doing his own thing, not had me on the, on the shoot at the same time. Because I've had that shit too, where you're on like a cover with someone, but you're not taking the photo at the same time. They're in their own like spot and they're not trying to hang out. And he's like totally kicking it, totally just like I said, actively part of the shoot, talking to the cameraman, talking to the, all that. It was super cool. And I was shocked how much his passing affected me. Because like obviously I was first record I ever bought. Well, the same day I bought Men at Work, Business as Usual, and Ozzy Blizzard of Oz. Those are my first two my own money purchased cassettes from Kmart when I was a kid. So Ozzy was always one of my original like influences. But when he passed, I was like crushed. I was a little surprised how much it affected me, and because I realized he's been intertwined in my life from my first cassette to like my biggest tour to all this stuff. And I'm like, man, without Sabbath, without Ozzy, without Ozzfest, without all that stuff, my life wouldn't even be close to being the same. So it was definitely more like losing a close friend or confidant than it was losing just like a legendary rocker. It was crazy.
Yeah. Yeah, and a few years ago, Shadows Fall reunited. What brought you guys back together after the hiatus in like the mid 2010s? And what are your all's plans as far as I know you've got a few new songs out, but like as far as bringing those together into like a full album at some point?
Yeah. So basically, when we stopped touring because just we were ground to dust. We'd been on the road nonstop. We were a type of band that toured 8 to 10 months out of the year. We didn't stop, and that had started for me with Overcast probably in the mid '90s. So by 2014, that kind of era, we were definitely a little burnt. We were also things weren't business wise going as well. Was just about to have my second kid, and I'd already watched my first kid crawl for the first time on Skype while I was in Bulgaria, and I was just like, this is getting hard. It was, I didn't want to miss a lot, wanted to be around, so we all kind of mutually. And John had just gotten the gig with Anthrax, and that's insane opportunity for him, like playing for a band of that he had posters of on his wall, and we had already kind of talked about slowing down. We're like, well, I don't want to hold you back. You go, we'll take a break. Jason had some other opportunities. He ended up playing at Overkill and some other bands and a lot of stuff. But we always stayed in touch. There wasn't any, we didn't break up for bad blood or anything like that. We didn't even really break up. We just kind of like, we just want to stop touring. And, but then, after, I think it was like 4 or 5 years, we were kind of chatting about like, oh, maybe be time to play a show, it'd be fun. And, And then of course COVID hit, and the original date got like got thrown off the calendar for about a year. And that first show was so much fun, and we realized right away we weren't a band that used to practice very much because we figured touring is practice. When you practice, you're way better. Like we practiced so much for that show, and we're like, holy shit, we could have been this tight all the time if we would have practiced. Holy shit, like who knew? And honestly, it was kind of the start of some of the metal hippie workout stuff. I was in probably the best shape I'd been in for decades, so we hit that stage like a fucking like just steamroller. It was awesome. So that got us pretty excited to just do some random shows. We did some festivals and got to see old. Doing the festivals was kind of like a high school reunion. You see all your old friends, and the first one we did was with like God Forbid and Kitty and Cannibal Corpse and all these bands. We're like, this is crazy. And John had been writing riffs pretty much the whole time. So he's like, if we're gonna do this, we should think about new music. And he started throwing out the first few demos, and we were just like, because my whole thing is I was like, well, it's got to sound like Shadows Fall, like and if it still does, I'm in. And the first few demos were like, holy shit, okay, yeah, no, this is gonna be good. So we dropped those first couple singles. The new record, we're working on it now. I don't know when it's going to be done. I don't know really how, what the plan is from there. Thankfully, we have the time to kind of dial everything in as much as we want. But it's been active. We've been actively in the studio, getting stuff done. But as far as the time frame, there's no real time frame, no real plans for a release. But it's at least new music exists. So we will once it is time to unleash it upon the world, it will be time.
Yeah, I mean, like Souls Devoured and In the Gray, like they both sound like you guys are just like re-energized, and I think your vocals sound like even more powerful than ever too.
Well, thank you. It's funny. I was singing in a band called Hell Night out here in St. Louis. That's way more like harsh, down-tuned, punkish, hardcore-ish, like noisy, weird shit. And it demanded some different kind of vocal styles and like especially a lot more harsh, almost high screaming, not like black metal, but like, in a more like raw way. So I wanted to bring some of that into it. I'd also been singing more melodic stuff in a band called Downpour and pushing my range. So we really want to bring all that in. And it's funny, the first two songs bring in almost all the elements we've had, but in their own like ways. Like, Souls Devoured starts with almost like a crowbar down riff, but then goes into like a black metal verse, like out of
Yeah.
nowhere with full raging double bass. And then the core, then all of a sudden there's the big matte, like melodic, like, uplifting part. And then In the Gray is just a thrasher with a big chorus. And we're like, that's kind of a little bit of what we do. And the rest of the record, we're filling in all those other gaps. There's like all the stuff that we've ever done because we've been a band that's been lucky enough to never kind of corner ourselves in one subgenre, you know, and always brought in elements of, thrash, death metal, hardcore, 80s metal, like a little bit of everything. So we're the writing is reflected that, and it's all over the place, man. But it's very Shadows Fall.
Yeah, I mean, those two songs brought me right back to the feeling that I had when I would go flying down like I-64 or I-65 listening to like War Within or Threads of Life or Retribution, you know?
Awesome, man. Well, good. We want, that was the thing when we were writing. We were like, it can't sound like we're suddenly like, oh, we're older and more mature, and this is what we do now. We're like, no, it's Shadows Fall, man. Like, like, like we want to bring in some new elements as far as just like, a vibe here and there, but it's not going to suddenly be like, oh, this is, some slowed down, dumbed down version of Shadows Fall because we're old and lazy. It's like, no, man, if anything, we're inspired to kind of, you know, show what not only what we can do, but just kind of like remind people of like, this is the metal has infinite potential. So like, just keep pushing the envelope.
Yeah. Well, I've had you for about an hour now. I don't want to take up your whole evening, but is there anything else that you want to put out there for Shadows Fall fans?
Oh man, I just appreciate, you taking the time to talk to me. Like I said, I don't know when or how or what, but new music's coming. No shows on the docket until that said new music is finished. So, we're really just kind of focusing on that. And but we will, go out and play some shows and do some stuff. So just, keep an eye out on our social medias and all that stuff. Which is, inactive because we're old guys. But we'll be letting people know when things are happening. And yeah, man, just appreciate it, man.
Yeah, thanks for taking the time.